Welcome to our channel. Today, we're exploring real childhood paranormal experiences, from ghostly encounters to mysterious phenomena. Get ready to be spooked by the creepiest and most eerie stories from people's pasts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more chilling tales. When I was 13 or 14, I was at my Wing Tsun lesson, and I was the only kid there among adults. While our Sifu demonstrated some movements we were supposed to train, he accidentally hit my glasses, without frames. They fell, and one of the glasses cracked. Nearly in half. Enough that when you twisted it a little, there was a gap. Everyone came and tried to help, but there was obviously nothing they could do except unbending the temple stem, so we put the glasses on a table and continued. After the lesson, I went to the table to grab my broken glasses, and I didn't see the crack anymore. My sister came over and apologized again, talking about insurance and saying that I shouldn't worry too much. I showed him the glasses. He too looked quite confused, and a few of the others who were still around joined. Everyone was kind of speechless, and the glasses were passed around. They slowly started to laugh it off and say, "I am lucky." That's it. It wasn't really mentioned anymore in the following lessons, like it never happened. While this isn't a typical paranormal or creepy story, it is usually not a story worth telling, and people tend to say that I probably dreamt it and shrug it off. I still think often about it, but as an adult, I just accept that it happened. When I was younger, we lived in a ranch-style house, meaning a long hallway with rooms on either side. My room was at the end of the hall on the left, and the master was at the end on the right. The end of the hallway was also the exterior wall of the house. My parents had a small TV in their room that they would leave on while they fell asleep. If it was still on and they were asleep, I would sneak in there, lay under their bed with my dog, and watch reruns of Dragnet. This was usually on at the time I snuck over. One night, my dog and I were lying under the bed, and the hall began to glow with a pale green light. The light kept getting stronger and brighter. As I'm seeing this light, the hair on my dog's neck and back starts to raise, and he gets into an aggressive posture. However, he does not make a sound. He was always very protective of me. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I saw a shadowy, illuminated green person slowly walk by the door. Followed by a smaller person, and then a third smaller person, all adult size. All three are looking straight ahead and walking like they've got somewhere to go. Now, mind you, the hallway ended maybe 18 inches past the edge of the door frame and was also the exterior wall of the house. Right after the third one is past the door frame, the light in the hall is gone, and there is a dim green light coming from the yard. I jumped out from under the bed and jumped in a recliner to look out the window and watch the three figures continue to walk through our side yard and up the hill into the woods. If there was a door where they exited, it would have been on the second story. There is no deck, no window, just the side of the house. Decades later, as I am writing this, I can vividly recall exactly what I saw, and the hair on my neck stands up. My mother used to have this old doll collection from her childhood. I think they were called Madame Alexandra dolls or something like that. They always looked off. I mean, they were dressed stereotypically according to different cultures of the world, like French, Inuit, Italian, etc., and looked really expressionless. They were a palish white color on their skin, and she must have had like 20 of them. They were collectibles, and from what I understand, they are around 60 years old at this point, give or take a few years. Anyway, one time when I was a kid, I was eating breakfast downstairs. I am watching TV in a low volume setting when I hear a distinct voice speak out. I don't remember what the hell it said because I was so terrified, but I do remember it was in the tone of a little girl. I freaked out and ran upstairs and told my mother, and she then said she also heard the same thing earlier that morning, but she did not remember or hear what it said either. It was not the TV, and it was not the walkie-talkies we had either malfunctioning. I have not heard anything like that since, so there are no real problems there. But at the time, and especially as a kid, that was scary as hell. I have no explanation for it either. I went through all the usual suspects, but nothing made sense. It was around 7:30 to 8:30 a.m., if I remember correctly, so no children were playing outside. We live up against a wood, so it really could not be anybody. I grew up in an old trailer house that was falling apart. Apparently my parents got it for dirt cheap because it was left abandoned in a field somewhere for a while. The place is creepy and is still standing at my mom's place, just taking up space. Anyway, when I was a little kid, I used to freak out, swearing up and down that I saw someone walking down the hall. My mom usually just told me that it was my imagination. As I got older, I would start to see what looked like a shadow dart into rooms or down the hall. I would hear footsteps and cabinets open and close. Finally, my mom admitted that she had seen and heard the same things, usually when she was in the house by herself. One night, I was walking to the kitchen, and I just happened to glance into the dark living room and nearly shit my pants. Something was sitting in our rocking chair, watching me. I bolted to my room and didn't go to sleep until it was daylight. I told my mom about it. She had never seen anything sitting in that chair, but she did say that it rocked by itself occasionally. Anyway, even though no one lives in the house anymore, I still walk in there from time to time. You can feel that something is still there, and it doesn't want you in there. I have a few. After my parents divorced when I was 6, I had to have lived in 9 to 10 different houses. The house I moved into first, and almost all of the rest of them have had signs that they were haunted. I'll talk about the big ones, RN. For reference, I have 3 sisters, but I will only talk about one in these stories. In the old house, I used to see shadow people at night. My mom would also hear children laughing and playing when everyone was fast asleep. We had this light in the upstairs hallway that never worked. It hadn't worked for over a year. We changed the light bulb multiple times and even got the electrician to come check it out a few times because we couldn't understand why that one wasn't working but the rest upstairs were. He told us that there was no reason it shouldn't work, there was nothing wrong with the wires or anything, and everything about it was perfectly fine, but it still didn't work for months. One night the light went on, and my sister went out into the hallway and said, "Hey mom, look, the light's working," and as soon as she said that, it went off and never worked again. Next house, so much shit went on in this house. On multiple occasions, my mom, me, and my sister all heard babies crying and old men talking when no one else was in the house, and we lived far enough from neighbors that we couldn't have heard them. I used to hear scratching on my door at night, not like a rat or rodent, like huge scratching. Like a big dog or something, and we didn't have any pets, and no one ever heard it. One time my sister and my mom were standing in the hallway, and all of a sudden the door of one of the bedrooms opened, and at full force, shoes started to be thrown out one by one, and the shoe rack in there fell over. There was no one else home besides them, and they were both outside the room. Once I was home alone, and I kid you not, I watched this huge antique bookcase we own move at least 5 inches from the wall all on its own. Okay, next house. We used to have a kitten when we lived there, and it would, every once in a while, meow or hiss at nothing on the wall or at random spots in the room. We could never figure out why. Next house, which is the one I live in now, we've had lights, TVs, and ceiling fans that all randomly turn on by themselves. My mom was breastfeeding my baby sister about a month ago, and she backed up, looked at my mom, and said, "There's a monster under the bed, mommy," and as soon as she said that, the fans in her room turned on. A lot of creepy shit has happened, not just here but also at my stepfamily's houses. It seems to be following us. This story is from a really long time ago, probably in 4th or 3rd grade. I was at my friend's house for his birthday, and there was a moment where we were alone, and he said he wanted to tell me something. Apparently, he had seen a black sheet float by him a couple days before, and he said it meant someone close to him would die soon. Despite being so young, I did not believe him and said it was nothing but your imagination. The next day, however, as I was waiting to be picked up, his family got the news that his grandmother had died during her sleep. We never talked about it again due to my moving out of state, but I have been thinking about it recently, and I feel awful for just ignoring his concern. I was wondering if anyone else has a story involving a black sheet and death, as even today it seems far-fetched, but after having my own possible paranormal encounters, I am not so sure. When I was a little kid, I had some imaginary friends. This is all what my family has told me and my recollection of their stories as I was 1 to 2 years old and don't remember a thing. But their conviction when telling me is what makes me believe them. I think it's semi-normal for small kids to have imaginary friends, but mine were not normal. My mom would ask me what their names were, and I'd reply with these complex Russian-sounding names that a normal toddler should not be able to pronounce. My mom doesn't remember any of the names specifically, but she said the names alone coming out of my mouth were terrifying. She'd ask me, "Are they kids?" And I replied, "No, they're men." She asked me what they looked like, and I described them as all black with nothing but red eyes and very tall. There was one instance when we were all eating supper in my kitchen and I was just staring through the back door's glass window when my mom asked, "What do you see?" And I said some crazy, complex names. I said he was just standing there watching us. That's the only specific story I can remember hearing. My family is not religious by any means, but my mother is still scared of my imaginary friends from when I was a small kid, and she truly believes I was seeing dark spirits of some kind. It's unnerving to think that happened to me as a baby, but I don't remember it, and it doesn't affect me today. Believe what you will, I believe my family stories. While there are many, I'll speak of the scariest one. One night when my mom was sleeping over at someone else's house, I remember waking up in the middle of the night while everyone else in the house was asleep, my grandmother and older sister, and I wanted some water, so I left my bedroom to go to the kitchen. The lights in the hallway at the time weren't working before someone forgot to replace the blown one, so I went to walk down the dark hallway when I just saw two reflexive eyes staring back at me. At the time, we didn't have a dog, and we for sure don't allow pets to sleep inside the house. So naturally, I stared at it and just went back to my room and slept on the bed with my older sister. This isn't even the only time that has happened in this house. Not in my childhood, but as an adult about 25. I moved in with a guy a few miles outside of our town, where I was used to living very close to neighbors, so I wasn't scared of living alone because I felt like I was surrounded by people. When I moved in with him, I said, "We'll be prepared for me to hang out at your job till you get home so I won't be scared in the dark." He worked late in a restaurant. Once we moved in, I quickly got very comfortable and was never freaked out in the house or by being alone, even at night. After a night of drinking, one night I woke up with him sleeping next to me. I woke up, and it looked like someone was standing at the end of the bed just looking at us. Not a clear face or anything, but a figure, and I was thinking to myself, so, did we let someone crash on the couch? Who is this? Realizing no one else was in the house and blinking and staring back at this figure, I just pulled up the covers and tried not to freak out. When I look again, I just think, oh, it was just the light coming through the window, but I was sure that someone was standing there. My cat loves to wake me up around 3 a.m. to beg for food, and because I can't sleep, I usually give it to him. That night was his second time doing that, so I made sure to notice the time. It was 3:22 a.m. Because he is an outside cat and I live fairly rurally, I go outside to make sure that no raccoons or possums come up to eat his food or attack him. I wander out into the yard occasionally because I don't want to sit and watch my cat eat and clean himself for 15 minutes and look out into the sky. I have no idea if what I saw was a UFO, but I did see something behaving weirdly in the sky, a glowing light that pulsated green, red, and blue and zigzagged across the sky. I watched it for what felt like maybe 20 minutes and decided to go back in because I was still tired from being woken up for the second time that night. But the oven clock read 5:46, 2 hours from what the time was supposed to be. So a fairly standard event of missing time. So basically, I was in second grade, and the school I went to was built over an old Indian burial ground, so it was rumored to be haunted. I had many paranormal experiences, but the scariest one was seeing a shadow man. So the story begins when I went to the upstairs bathroom. That was apparently the most haunted one and was the closest, so I decided to go there. When I got there, it was very dirty, as usual, but my 7-year-old self didn't care, so I went on doing my business. When I was about to finish, I heard a toilet paper roll drop in the stall next to me. I was alone, and I remember thinking, that's strange. So, being curious, I decided to check out why it fell, so I walk into the stall expecting to see nothing out of the ordinary, and then I see it. I was looking straight at the floor because I was looking for the roll of paper, and I see a pair of black feet, not shoes. It was like someone barefoot, and it was the darkest black I have ever seen, if that makes sense. I remember freezing up, not moving, and not breathing. I was too afraid to do anything. So I decided to back up and absolutely take off. That was probably the fastest I ever ran in my life, but when I got down the hallway toward my class, the speakers started going, "This is a code red, I repeat this is a code red, this is not a drill." I don't know if this was a coincidence or what, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get to class, so when I get to my class, the door is locked, of course, and they aren't letting me in, so I start just knocking on every door in the hallway, just wanting to be let in, and finally a teacher lets me in, and that was the end of that. I didn't use that bathroom for weeks after that, as I was terrified of seeing it again. That was not the last paranormal thing I saw in that school, though there was this one light right outside my classroom, and it would flicker every time I went past it, and only me, not my classmates, not the teacher, just me. So that is basically my scariest encounter. I'm not sure if my imagination made it up, but that was scary, and I still get chills thinking about it. Context: I have an older brother, older by like 2.5 years, and my mom had a miscarriage the year after I was born, early in the development to the point where we don't even know what sex the fetus was. I'm a fab. When I was 7 or 8 one morning, I woke up to someone else in my bed. I wasn't afraid. My memory recalls it not being an unfamiliar face. It was a girl who was only about a year younger than me. It was like waking up the morning of a sleepover. We had the same hair color, though her hair was longer than mine. Looking back on my memory and pictures of me around that age, we had similar eyes and the same exact puffy lower eyelid that pops out when I smile too hard. But it wasn't my mind simply reflecting what I perceived my face to be, because she still looked different. She had my mother's nose, just like my brother. We giggled at each other, just like little girls would. The sun was shining through my window a bit, the only negative of having an east-facing bedroom. The light bounced off her in a strange way, like the edges of her face and hair were made of dust. She wasn't translucent, but she wasn't a solid human either. I had woken up early that day, so I went back to sleep. It took me years to realize that I had met my sister, who died before she could even be born. This is not the first time dead family members have visited me while I was laying in bed. So to give a little context, all of me and my friends when we were in our teens lived in the same area. And our parents, uncles, aunts, and basically all of the older people in our families grew up in this area too. We've been living in this neighborhood for a while now. And we'd all experienced some weird shit. Like seeing a man at the school late at night 1 second later, and when we all looked back, not even 10 seconds later, he was gone. We looked for him for like half an hour, and there's no way he could have possibly evaded us without leaving, and we would have heard his car and seen him. He was gone in an instant. There's also some old hazelnut orchards that basically fill up most of the area. And the street lanes in these areas were built in the 1960s. But anyway, we usually have to walk through or by these orchards to get to and from each other's houses. And at one time or another, something has happened to all of us. We've been pushed, scratched, bit, and a couple times we've heard little kids. The scariest time, however, was when we saw a tall figure in the distance just staring at us. We stopped walking towards him, and he made a howling noise and started barreling towards us. And we took off, running into the orchards. We looked back, and he was gone. Just like that. I came to find out recently that back in the early 80s, a cult used to sacrifice people up there. One guy killed over 20 people with a machete after sexually assaulting them. We'd all been told this story by different family members, but we all just thought they were trying to scare us. And that was just a few things that have happened. I have no clue if this is a paranormal experience or not, but here it goes. I'm hoping the people who read this have been to the places in St. Augustine, so it's easier to imagine. When I was 12, I went with my parents and grandmother to St. Augustine, which was only like a 30-minute drive since I lived pretty close. We would be staying the night and leaving around 10 a.m. It was around 9 p.m. And we went into the little town, the one right across from the fort. We were getting fudge and ice cream since we wouldn't be there very long in the morning. We didn't know it yet, but the fort had already closed, and that's where we were headed. I was walking about 3 feet behind everyone when I felt something pull my hair, not hard enough to yank me back but hard enough where I knew it wasn't the wind. It had been a very windy day, but at the moment this happened, there was no wind. I had gone to St. Augustine many times in my life, and that was the first time anything like that happened. I knew it was haunted. I had seen videos of spirits there caught on camera and had been inside very haunted places. I didn't realize just how haunted it was until that day. And no, that hair-pulling experience is not what made me realize it was haunted, it's just that I didn't realize how many people died and how many spirits are in that city. You know what I'm talking about? I used to live in a condo for a little bit, and this was the only time this or anything paranormal happened. When I was younger, I was an early riser, still am, and I would wake up at about 6 to 6:30 a.m. I would then go downstairs and get some breakfast. But, this one random day, when I was about to flick the switch to turn on the lights, a little bit of context, the light switches were right next to a corner of a wall, so I can't see what's on the other side of the corner. This hand with a .44 Magnum, or what looked to be a similar one, shot out in front of me. I immediately ran back upstairs and got my mom, thinking someone had broken into our house. But when my mom and I checked, there was nothing there. We moved to the house we live in today. When we were children, my sisters and I had lots of encounters with paranormal activity. What I can remember is that there were 2 children with long hair and white clothes. To me, they seemed like sisters, one taller than the other, and there was also a really tall man with a hat and wearing all black. This man was seen going around the houses in my neighborhood. The girls seemed to be running from this man because I always saw them hiding from him. If he was in the living room, they would be hidden in our room, something like that. Other things that happened were that on occasions I would hear the sound of glasses being smashed or things being broken. My dad likes to collect glasses and cups, and at night I would hear someone smash them really hard to the point where it seemed they were all broken, but when I saw them, they were intact. The closest encounter I had with one of the spirits I saw was when I was in my room and I woke up in the middle of the night and saw one of the girls sitting at the bottom of my sister's bed. I always saw the girls together, so I started wondering where the other was. At that time my bed was set so that my head faced the window. As I was wandering, I felt a chill creeping at my neck, and suddenly I was face to face with one of the sisters. She came like out of the window, I don't know how to explain it well, and I was frozen in fear. The only thing I did was cover myself with blankets, turn around, and hug my cousin, who was staying the night, really hard and try to just fucking sleep. There are a lot of other things that happened while we were little and growing up in this house, but this is what I can recall at the moment. When I was about 12 or 13, I went to pee at night. To go to bathroom I had to cross the kitchen, in which the light switch was by the door to the hallway that lead to bathroom, so I had to cross the kitchen in the dark, which is not an issue since I grew up in the house. As I was leaving the kitchen I flipped the switch on so I'd have light coming back, did my business and came back just to see that the whole kitchen floor was covered in shattered glass from a 3-liter jug that had fallen. The thing is I walked with bare feet, didn't hear anything shatter while I was peeing either, so the only conclusion I can come up with is that the glass was there when I crossed in the dark to go to the bathroom. I have no clue how I could have crossed the whole kitchen in the dark and not stepped on a single piece, let alone not even touched one with my feet. My mom had died fairly recently, so I just thought she guided me through as my guardian angel, even though now, more than 10 years later, I don't really believe that I have any other logical explanation. I have had a lot, especially at my grandmother's house. Once, my cousin, my ex-boyfriend, and I were at her house while she wasn't home, but we were on her porch. My cousin went inside to use the bathroom, and a minute later, my ex-boyfriend and I went inside to get some drinks from the refrigerator. We hear my cousin say she'd be out in a minute, but it sounded like she was in the same room as us speaking and not yelling from the other end of the house. Ex looked at me like, "That's weird." She came in from the bathroom, and she got scared when she saw us because she didn't know we were in the house. She hadn't said anything to us, so when we explained, she was visibly horrified. Another time it was late at night and I heard what I thought was one of my grandparents walking from their bedroom, and suddenly a ridiculously loud series of bumps sounded like someone tumbled all the way down her long staircase. I jumped out of bed and ran down the steps to check on them, but no one was there, nothing was out of place. I ran back upstairs to their bedroom, and they were both asleep. I was probably 13, and I slept in their bed that night. I also used to have crazy sleep paralysis when I stayed there and would wake up on my knees on the edge of the bed, but the rest of my body would be hanging off the side, but elevated, and when I woke up, I would smell blue smoke and would fall to my hands and face. Across the street from my grandma's house is my great-aunt's house. Behind her house is a cemetery where I believe maybe Stonewall Jackson's parents are buried, along with about 30 to 40 other deceased people. I would have dreams of spirits inviting me over to talk and asking what happened to the church. There was a church behind the cemetery, but it was torn down about 25 years ago. My aunt saw some scary stuff at that church before I was born. There was another time my cousin, the same one from earlier, as well as the same ex-boyfriend, were playing with an Ouija board on my bed, and it predicted my little cousin's death. He was like 6, so we thought it was BS. But it turned out that he had neuroblastoma and passed away about 8 months later. If this isn't buried and anyone wants more, I have over 20 years worth of this shit. My grandma shared custody with my mom, so I would be at my grandma's house every Thursday through Monday. When I was about 8, I don't know if it was sleep paralysis or some crap like that, but I suddenly woke up at 3, cliché enough, and I could see myself sleeping, as if I were floating above myself, and suddenly I got sucked back to my body and I saw a black figure in our window. I slept with my mom that day. I wanted to move, but I couldn't move any part of my body but my chest, not even a finger, nor my head, nor my legs. I just started moving my chest up and down, moving the whole bed, but my mom didn't seem to wake up, so again I saw myself in third person and could see myself just flopping my chest. Then I woke up sweating, and my mom was trying to wake me up. To this day, it still gives me the creeps. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at my grandma's house. Both of my parents worked long hours, so her place became like a second home. She was a tough old woman. Rail thin, but strong. Sometimes I'd watch her go about her routine and wonder if she was some kind of witch. She just had a witchy way about her. But, of course, that might just be what resourcefulness looks like to a kid. Anyway, her house didn't help. It was old. Everything in it was old, and it was dark. I don't know how best to describe it other than to say that I always felt that being inside my grandma's house wasn't much different from being outside of it. In any season, the windows in the house would stay jammed open with old, bent screens, which had to be shimmed into place with old slats from some discarded louver door. Grandma had this rusty pot-belly stove right smack in the middle of her bedroom. I remember constantly dodging it as I ran through the house, playing. At night, she'd load the stove with one great big chunk of hickory, and you could see the flames licking through the cracks. I'd lay on the floor with my sleeping bag, positioning myself so that the stove was in between me and Grandma's bed. Facing this direction meant that I could easily see the window at the foot of her bed. It was like a nightlight for me. Everything in that house was black at night, unless there was a window nearby. So, there I lay one night. It was chilly, and I remember having trouble sleeping because the moonlight coming through the window was so bright. It was late, which meant the stove wasn't roaring anymore. Besides my grandma breathing, the whole house was dead silent. It was just the two of us. No one else was in the house. Without any warning, a tall black figure calmly walks from the shadows on the far side of the room. He passed between the stove and bed, across the floor just a foot from my head, and out through the doorway into the kitchen. I was petrified. I couldn't move an inch. This may sound crazy, but had I felt like a burglar was in the house, I'd like to think I would have moved. Or shouted, or something. I didn't think it was a burglar, though. There is no specific reason why. It just felt wrong. I don't think I fell asleep that night. All I remember is staring at the kitchen doorway for a long, long time. When my grandma woke up, she rolled out of bed and grabbed the fire poker. I sat up and began to tell her what I'd seen. Like I said, I always felt like my grandma was a little bit witchy. After I finished telling her about the tall man, she just poked at the coals in the stove and said, I haven't seen him in a long time. My friends and I got stupid one night and made a homemade Ouija board. We played on the table in our basement. To set up the scene, my room was in the basement, and my window was open. However, it was not an easy window to open or close. You had to, almost, put your entire weight behind it to do that. Also, I had broken a glass in my bathroom earlier that day, and the broom was leaning between the bathroom door and the desk in my room. So, we're messing around, asking questions, and accusing each other of moving it around. I finally got irritated with all the pushing, so I said, if anyone is hearing, make yourself heard or seen. There was a complete silence for a minute or two. It was long enough for the three of us to giggle nervously. Then, my bedroom window slammed shut, and the broom smashed onto the bathroom floor. We all screamed and burned the Ouija board letters. We made them out of paper, and went and stayed at my friend's house. It took me a good month before I could sleep in my bed without all the lights on. It was in 9th grade, I was 15 at the time, I guess. I studied at the Law Lyceum and lived at school that year, except on weekends. The living building was founded near 1939 and was used for boarding schools, war hospitals, and, I guess, some nuns taking care of patients or something. Given all that, I'd been hearing stories, mostly jokes, about ghosts. A teacher told me that in one year, crucifixes appeared on trees, and older students told some spooky stories, nuns' suicide in the basement, chairs falling at night, etc. Some of the stories were told by my roommates, but I'm not sure about their honesty. Well, I too experienced something that I am pretty sure isn't just my imagination, despite being told so. One morning, after school assembly and before classes, one student from every room returned back to that building to do some cleanup in the rooms. My room was in the corner on the first floor. Under the room, the basement, on the side was the room of the teacher, and it was already closed. There could probably be 1 to 2 people in the room above. So it was pretty quiet. I was packing my stuff near the door when I heard crying and sobbing from the other corner of the room. I got pretty scared, ran out, came back in only to grab my backpack, and quickly left. I don't know what it was, but I do know that I heard it clearly. And I don't think it was the pipes or something. No one took a shower at that time, and it wasn't raining either. Later, my roommates told me they heard something in the same corner. Serious, when I was about 6 or so, I woke out of my sleep because I heard spoons, forks, and pans falling down on the kitchen floor. It must have been late hours. My mom always left the highway light on in the kitchen at night. So I went halfway down the staircase and looked over the banister, looked to the kitchen, and said, "Mom?" No answer, but I can still hear spoons, pans, and forks hitting the floor. So, I slowly went into the kitchen, and there was nothing there, no spoons, no pans, no forks on the floor. I was scared shitless that I ran so fast that I skipped steps to get to my room, onto my bed. We didn't have a door on the hinges. I went under the covers, and I could hear footsteps coming up the staircase. To this day, I still sleep with my covers over my head, and I still skip steps. That's just one of many paranormal things, and it gets crazier. Respect the spirits and souls out there, trust me. One of my earliest and most vivid memories took place when I was around 2 or 3. I can clearly remember waking up in the middle of the night to strange people standing at the foot of my bed. I shared a room with my brother at the time, He would sleep on the top bunk while I had the bottom. The two occurrences that stick out were the time that there was an elderly woman sitting perched on the railing at the foot of my bed. She was not scary at all, and while I write this, I think I can also remember her stroking my legs and feet. She was a pale gray color and had curly hair. There was another time in which I saw a man with an afro standing to my left. The wall was to my right as I lied in bed, and I remember him watching me for a while until I fell asleep. These occurrences all took place in the middle of the night after I had randomly woken up, and so they could just be figments of a young child's extremely active imagination. Saying that, my mother tells me stories of times when I've supposedly seen ghosts. One of my favorite things to say was that there were monsters at the top of the stairs, and I would stand there sucking my fingers and looking up in terror. Another time we'd apparently gone out for a walk, and I just started staring blankly at nothing and randomly saying, "I don't like that girl with the big ouch," ouch meaning cut or wound. There was also no girl there. Perhaps I was just making it up, or maybe I really did used to see ghosts when I was younger. At my house, there was a long hallway room on the immediate right, a little further, a linen closet. Directly after the linen closet was my room, and across from my room was the bathroom, and at the very end was my parents' room. There was a wood hatch in the middle of my room, my parents', and the bathroom in the hallway. There was no latch, no pulley, no knob, it was there, and it led to the attic of the house, which was never opened or explored, it was just there. One night I went to use the restroom, and I saw a figure in the bathroom I thought nothing of. I shared a room with my sister and one of my parents had night duty with the baby, so it could have been one of them. So I sit there and wait for them to be done, and I'm sitting under this hatch in the middle of the hallway, and I hear something like the sound of cooking an egg, but it's bassy, almost like a water drip, but with tar or mud. So I look up and see a watery figure shifting across the ceiling, then slipping into the hatch and disappearing, so I am feeling out, and I go into the bathroom. Only then does it get louder, and I start to look around and see the steam vent in the ceiling, so I get up on the counter and I look up, and as I have my eye nearly to the vent, all of the light bulbs pop, putting cuts all over me and tearing the shower curtain and lodge themselves into the wood cabinet, ceiling, and baseboard. I run out and go into my parents' room, and their mirrors are all cloudy. When I turn the lights on, they aren't there, and all of the mirrors break, mirrored doors on the closet, a mirror in the wardrobe, all of them but a small hand mirror. I look into it and see the hatch on the door curling open, and I faint and wake up in my own closet. I have sleep paralysis and a bad history of nightmares, but this was real. The cuts were there were holes in the wood cabinet, and the lights, in the bathroom, were all gone. The large mirrors, the one on the wardrobe and the doors, were fine, but the hand mirror was broken. This day, or whatever the hell it was, and to this day we have never opened the hatch on the ceiling. When I was 10, we lived in a small house in a small town that was populated by about 3,000 to 4,000 people. A couple of weeks after Halloween, I would start hearing scratching noises coming from under my bed. Everybody thought that I was just pulling their leg with some stupid prank. I was one to pull a lot of pranks on my friends and family. But every night it would just be the same thing. Around 9 o'clock at night, I would hear like something had a death wish on the carpet. This went on until I would just sleep upstairs on the couch. My parents still did not believe me. They had my brother sleep in my room with me so they could see if I was lying or not. But like most horror movies or stories, it stopped that night, only for it to come back when my brother once again started to sleep in his own room. After Christmas, I was still terrified. Most everybody I talked to said it was probably my cat. I had a routine of putting my cat outside before night, as he was an indoor and outdoor cat. For the next 2 or so weeks, it stopped. I thought I had finally found a solution to my problem. But the sounds came back again, and again, and again. Eventually, 10-year-old me mustered all the courage I had and looked under the bed. There was nothing under it, just my regular floor. This went on and on and on. A large portion of my childhood nights are now filled with those terrifying thoughts and memories. Eventually, we moved to a larger town for my dad's work. When we did, it all stopped, and to this day, I still have no clue what it could have been. I do not remember the exact age at which this happened to me, but I was probably around 10. I would say minimum 9 and maximum 12. At that time, I was living with my mom, sister, and stepdad in a village bordering a city. I often played with some other children in front of my house or roamed in the village. Near the village, around 1.4 hours from my house, were some tennis courts and 2 football fields, or soccer fields if you prefer. One of the football fields was smaller than the other one and a little bit higher, like 2 meters higher. Both were very close. The higher and smaller one was the furthest from the road and was surrounded by forest on 3 sides. One evening, I was there alone. I probably got there on my bike, but to be perfectly honest, I have no memory of how I finished on that field. I am sure that it was quite late, unusually late for me to be outside, because the sun was falling and this happened in the middle of summer. While I was there, alone with my bike by my side in the middle of this football field, I kept my eyes on the forest, looking left to right. I began to see something strange, like some lights in the forest moving from left to right and right to left at a speed faster than mine on my bike. Although I knew that there was a path in the forest behind some trees, the lights were too close or too far to be on it. And especially, the lights were too many and were moving and turning too fast to be bikes. One more detail is that there was no sound coming from them, not a single sound from the park nor the forest. And I stood there, looking, with not a single idea of what to do. Then one light stops. It stops just in the middle. I began to feel a little scared and strange. I felt like it was looking at me, knowing that I was there and looking at it. I know this moment didn't last long, but it felt so long at the time. Suddenly, the light began to move in my direction. And she moved fast. I knew there was no long distance between it and me. So I took my bike, and without looking behind me, I pedaled the fastest I could. I vaguely remember the return, but I know that I got directly to my home. I was really afraid. And when I got to sleep, I felt like something was watching me through the window. I need to be precise in saying that my room was a little underground at that time and that my window was at the same level as the street floors. This sensation was threatening. Nobody remembers that event for me. Nor my mother, nor my sister or stepdad. I still have no idea what I was doing over there, especially alone so late, nor do I have any idea how I got there. But this evening will always be engraved in my memory. When I was a child, I would stay at my aunt's house pretty often. On multiple occasions, I saw a man standing on the staircase, plain as day. I would tell my aunt, and at first, she would freak out, searching the house for an intruder. Eventually, she figured out I was seeing an apparition and would tell me to leave him alone if I saw him. As I got older, I stopped seeing the man. My sister is 10 years younger than me, and shortly after she was walking and talking on her own, she began telling me and my aunt about a man on the stairs. It was very chilling to hear her give the same description of what I used to see as a child. I had almost forgotten about this story until a few months ago, when my nephew began seeing a man on the stairs. A generational ghost story, if you will. My mom's neighborhood is in an area with a Russian graveyard. We live in the US, but this area had a huge Russian population in the 60s and 70s. It is said that the graveyard used to take up the entirety of the neighborhood but was relocated to a smaller area within the neighborhood once the houses were built. I grew up in this house with my 3 sisters. All of us had experiences, but I will speak to my own experiences. There was a shadow figure that would always hang around the foot of my sister's bed. I would wake up around the same time every night, and the figure would be there. She would always be asleep, and she never saw it. In the same room, if you slept on the floor around midnight, you would feel footsteps walking across the floor. All of my sisters tried it out and felt the same thing. The lights flicker in the hallway. My mom has had 3 electricians look at the wiring, and they have all said there is no reason for them to flicker the way that they do. My mom said that she realized that when I went to college, the lights stopped flickering and would start up again when I came to visit. We all believe we have seen a little boy darting around in my sister's room. The activity pretty much stopped until we all started having children of our own. My mom still lives in this house. One time, when my children stayed the night, they told me that they saw a little boy running around by the playroom. We never told them about the little boy, and the playroom is what used to be my sister's room. The summer after my 4th grade year, we moved to a new, to us, house on the outside of town. An old lady had lived there alone for several years after her husband passed, didn't finish paying the mortgage, and then passed away as well. My parents ended up purchasing the house from the bank, and when we started to move in, everything that was hers was still there. Cups and plates in the cabinets, food in the refrigerator, and pillows and sheets on the beds. Being that we didn't live in 1960, we got rid of all of her things. Most we threw in a dumpster, but other items were burned in a pit located in the backyard, 10+ acres of land. Before we were officially moved in, my aunt, uncle, and 5-year-old cousin went to the house to check it out while my parents were at work. After walking through the house, while getting into the car, my cousin asked, "Who is my new grandma?" My aunt replied, "You don't have a new grandma, this is your aunt and uncle's new home." My cousin replied, "Then who was the old lady in there?" This was dismissed at the time as just something a kid would say if he saw a picture or something. A few months later, after we were completely moved in, my mom was lying in bed, about to fall asleep. She typically falls asleep quickly, but this night she was having a bit of trouble. She felt the bed sink down behind her, laying on her side facing the middle of the bed, and assumed it was the cat jumping up. About 5 minutes passed, and she still couldn't fall asleep. She opened her eyes and turned around to see the cat, but there was no cat. It was just a dip in the bed as if someone were sitting there, but there was nothing. A few weeks later, my dad is laying in bed in the morning, dreading his upcoming work day, and just trying to have a few relaxing minutes to himself. Laying on his back with one pillow under his head, he suddenly felt something tugging at the pillow. He lifted his head slightly, and the pillow went flying across the room. Again, nothing was there. Come Christmas, we had 2 trees. One was a real tree that was located in our main family room. This tree had all the ornaments that my parents had collected throughout the years. In what we called the front living room, which was a room we were not allowed in due to having fancy furniture, we had a fake tree that was decorated with red bulbs, blue bulbs, and tinsel. One morning we woke up and there was a semicircle of 6 red bulbs that had been plucked from the tree, metal hook and cap still on the tree, laying on the ground halfway around the tree. Neither me nor my 2 brothers would have done this because, 1. Why? And 2. We actually got spankings on this day. The same Christmas, we had our family over for a celebration. Everything went according to plan, and nothing out of the ordinary occurred. That is, until family members went to have pictures developed. Google it if you don't know what that means. The pictures that didn't have the Christmas tree in them were 100% fine and normal. The pictures, from multiple cameras, that did have the Christmas tree in them were all messed up. It looked like the bulbs were moving vigorously as the pictures were taken. Then, in one image, there seemed to be multiple skull-like objects with long tails floating over our family. Now, the whopper story, this one is hard to believe, and I literally only told the other stories to validate this one. Something was obviously going on at this house. One cold night, my brothers and I were home alone because my mother was working late. We decided that we wanted to go outside to play some basketball. My brothers, one 2 years older than me and the other 4 years younger, went outside ahead of me as I still needed to put on socks and tell the ladies goodnight on MSN Messenger. As I was on the computer and putting on my socks, I looked up into the kitchen and saw an old lady standing in the corner, spinning a small cup with her left hand. I freaked out and ran outside to get my older brother. When I got to him and told him what I had seen, I could tell he didn't believe me. But he picked up a tennis racket just in case. We walked up through the back and went into the door that leads directly into the kitchen. My older brother walked to the corner where I saw her, and my younger brother and I walked around the island to the entry of the dining room. My older brother, standing in the corner where I saw her, turned around to look at me and said, "See, there is nothing here." Just as the words came out of his mouth, poof, she appeared right behind him. I yell, "Turn around." He does, he sees her. Panicked, he says, "Oh, hello." He takes one step back, and then the front of his shirt wrinkles up as if she is grabbing him, but we can't see her hands. He tries to kick, but he is tossed onto his back and slid across the laminate kitchen floor. My younger brother let out a shrieking scream or cry, and instantly, wham! The cup she was spinning when I first saw her went flying across the kitchen and hit my brother in the chest, leaving a bruise. We all ran out the front door and sat outside for hours before my mom got home. My dad was a skeptic, and he interrogated us individually to get the story. After his assessment, he said it must be true because we had never described anything exactly the same before this moment. My mom was the religious one in the household, and she had a pastor come out to bless the house. About a week later, we had a plumber come to our home to fix some things that were outdated, and he was talking to my dad about the house. My dad did not say a word about what had been going on, but after the conversation, the plumber did something very odd. He said, "Honestly, I'm not really sure why I am doing this, but I feel like I need to. Do you have any Scotch tape?" My dad opened the junk drawer and pulled out the tape. The plumber then pulled a small brass cross out of his pocket and taped it to the window right next to where my brothers and I encountered the ghost. We didn't experience any paranormal activity after that day, and the cross is still there. I was 4, and I saw my granddad at the side of my bed, and he hugged me and said goodbye. I was a bit confused, but I was also sleepy as it was close to midnight. I then heard the telephone ring, and he said that it would be about me going to get your mom, so I did. I ran into her bedroom and told her the phone was ringing. "It's about Granddad," and she shushed me and sent me back to bed. Half an hour later, the phone did ring, and it was my grandfather telling her that he had died half an hour earlier. It freaked my mother out. On the day of his funeral, after the service and the cremation, we went back to the grandparents' house, and I stood in the living room looking out of the window. I saw him on the balcony of the block of flats at the back of the house, and he was waving to me, and I began waving back and shouting to him. My mother went to slap me, saying it was upsetting my gran, but my gran stopped her and told her that she believed that I was seeing him, and he was probably letting me know that he would be watching over me. I was his only grandchild and his little princess, and I do know that he's watching over me, as is my grandma now. I was in my childhood bedroom one evening, minding my own business, when the door opened. It was like someone had opened the door by pulling down the handle and then pushing on it. I thought it was my older sister, and I got up to see what she was doing. The door then slammed shut, like someone had put all their force into it. I then tried opening the door, but whoever slammed it seemed to be holding it shut from the other side. Then it let go, and there was nobody there. I checked my sister's room, but she had been down the stairs with my parents on the other side of the house the whole time. A couple of days later, my sister witnessed something push over a big pile of her textbooks and send them flying across the room. At the time of this happening, I'd have been about 10 and my sister about 16. My mom died when I was 9. Before she died, she always talked about reincarnation, and if it was real, she wanted to come back as a bird of prey. So about a week after she died, my father noticed there was an owl that seemed to always appear around bedtime. It would perch on a telephone pole that was right outside my window. It would stay there until my dad got up in the morning. This continued for 3 years until my dad started dating again and his girlfriend moved in. After she moved in, the owl never came back. My dad never told me this until years later, when all of us kids could be together to spread her ashes on the bay where she wanted to be. I guess I feel it was my mom. I will never know until my day comes. When I was around 6 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night. I had fallen asleep at a movie, and I distinctly remember waking to the blue glow of my little VHS TV. I even remember the movie that had been playing, a 1995 kids movie called Gold Diggers, The Secret of Bear Mountain. I laid there in bed and tried to close my eyes so I could go back to sleep, but every time I tried to shut my eyes, I would see an image, like an intrusive vision I couldn't control. I would see maybe 4 or 5 silhouettes standing on a hill with the sun rising behind them. The longer I closed my eyes each time, the higher the sun rose. From the silhouettes of these men, I could tell that they were wearing wide-brim fedora hats, but at the time I called them top hats, not knowing the correct term for a fedora, and they also appeared to be wearing trench coats. And they were very tall. I think seeing this vision startled me, so I stopped trying to sleep and sat up in my bed. I was fully awake at this point. My eyes were open, and I was definitely awake. As I looked forward at the space on my wall between my door and my closet, there was a silhouette just like the ones I had seen in that intrusive vision. He had the trench coat and the hat. But he was sitting on the silhouette of a horse. This specific detail I'm not totally sure is accurate. I can't see how the silhouette of an entire horse would have fit in between my door and my closet, and I was also very into horses at this time, so my brain may have inserted the horse detail to make the experience less frightening for me. I'm not sure how long I sat up in bed staring at that figure before I got the courage to get up, but I eventually jumped out of bed and bolted through my bedroom door and toward my parents' room down the hall. My mother still remembers me waking her up and telling her about what I'd seen. What makes this even stranger is that recently I learned that my sister saw the same thing. She moved to Colorado not long ago, and I drove across the country with her to help her move. At some point, she was driving and asked me to talk about anything I could think of to help her stay awake since she was getting sleepy. I chose to talk about this weird thing I experienced as a child. When I was done, she told me, "Yeah, I saw that too." She said she saw the same thing in my parents' room when she would sleep in their bed. She used to call them basketball players because they were very tall, but now she was telling me that they wore top hats, or at least that's what she'd called their hats when she was younger. She now knew that they were wide-brimmed fedoras, just as I had seen.
One day I, F4 to 5 then, was playing catch with my mom, and that ball had rolled into the bedroom.
I went to go get it. My mom then heard a scream. I ran out, jumped on my mom, and yelled, "She's back. The little girl is back." My mom looked around and saw nothing. She then turned to me, asking, "Where is she now?" I pointed to the garage door. My mom, looking very frightened from what she saw, said, "Okay, let's go to the room." From there, she asked me what the little girl looked like, and all I can say is that she looked like me. There were no mirrors in the room I went into. Then, from inside the room, we heard the garage door open and close slowly. I will never forget that day. I have one about a friend's house. I had to check with him to get the details correct. This would have been in the mid-1970s. His parents bought a new ranch house with typical 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a double-car garage off of a mud room. His sister and her husband inherited the house last year and have totally redone the kitchen and living room. When I would visit, I never liked to be in the living room or den area. I always felt uncomfortable. His mom was okay with people being in her kitchen, so we usually hung out there. One day, I mentioned to him why the living room was so much colder than the rest of the house. He didn't know. His dad was in the army and not always home. His mom was the sweetest person ever. She had mentioned to her husband that she had heard footsteps in the house. With 5 kids, he dismissed her comment. It wasn't a big house, but it was comfortable. Some weird things started to happen. Found out from his sister, as we were in college. Doors would open, cabinet doors wouldn't stay shut. Little things got misplaced. Until one day, the mom was in her bedroom and decided to take a nap. She laid down on the bed and fell asleep. She woke up when someone sat on the edge of the bed, thinking it was her husband or maybe one of the kids she turned over. No one was there. She sat up and was sitting on the edge of the bed when something under the bed reached out and grabbed her ankle and lower leg. Rita let out a scream, and her husband came running. Nothing under the bed. The dad just figured it was her imagination or the cover hitting her leg. Rita swore something grabbed her. By this time, they had lived in the house for almost a year, and more strange things happened. Then one day the baby sister, maybe 8, got locked in her bedroom closet. She couldn't get the knob to open. She started screaming. Her dad came running, and she told him she could hear someone laughing when she couldn't get out of the closet. Well, that was enough. The family was Catholic and talked to the priest about the strange goings-on at the house. The priest agreed to come bless the house, except once he and his assistant got there, the priest said he felt an evil presence. He said a blessing but told the parents that he was coming back to do something else. The next week, he came back with incense, holy water, his Bible, and 2 assistants. The family had to leave, so no one is sure what went on. But after about 3 hours, the family was told they could come back. After that, no one heard anything, no one felt anyone grab them, the doors stayed shut, etc. Afterwards, the parents learned that a man had died while the house was being built and that no one lived in the house for more than a year at a time. The parents stayed in the house. The dad died in 2000, and the mother just passed away in 2020. The kids grew up, and grandkids came along. No one ever had any trouble anymore. I had one of those haunted feeling rooms that felt like you were being stared at even in broad daylight. I got used to it over the years and genuinely ignored or wrote off the random things that happened as surely in my mind because it made it easier to sleep in there. When my older sister came back from university, she needed somewhere to sleep, so my parents got us a double bed to share, with her on the right and me on the left. On each side of the bed was a solid oak side table, heavy AF, with matching lamps, and the only 2 plug sockets in the room were irritatingly behind each very heavy oak side table. Using the plug socket to plug in anything was a fairly arduous task, shunting the solid oak furniture away from the wall to reach the socket, so being a lazy teenager, I left my side table slightly ajar from the wall at all times. Sheer convenience. This is only relevant because one day I plugged in my straighteners as usual and left them sitting on my side table to heat up, as I always did, whilst going into the bathroom to put Moroccan oil on my hair. I sidled around the bed to the bathroom door, next to my sister's side of the bed, spent 10 seconds running oil through my hair, then popping back around the bed to pick up my straighteners. But, oh, they're gone. Huh. I definitely plugged them in. I'm baffled for about 3 seconds and then jump about 5 feet in the air as the corner of my eye spots my straighteners, plugged into my sister's side of the bed, in the hidden plug socket somehow behind the tidily put back against the wall sideable. Now this is utterly impossible because to do this, I would have had to heave-ho the heavy oak pile of pointless furniture away from the wall, grapple with the socket, and then shun it back into its original place. I pulled it away, unplugged the straighteners, and went curly for a few days. It is not very interesting, but I cannot explain it at all. Why? I was in Denmark. I sat on a grey stone building on the beach, and when I blinked, the beach and building as I knew them were different. The light was off, and there were soldiers running around me with red bands and a white circle on their right arms. As I blinked again, they were gone. I later found out that Denmark had been occupied by the Nazis in World War II, and soldiers wore those bands. I tried touching objects and looking into the past again after that, and it kind of worked, but I didn't really trust it, because maybe now that it happened, I might be imagining it, and thus it seemed even more surreal, so I consider Denmark the most paranormal. I was about 9 years old, taking a rest after my birthday party. I had a really strong headache, so my mom gave me some painkillers, and I got to bed. I remember I was not even close to falling asleep, the pain's too strong. I was turning and grabbing my head for like 15 minutes, maybe less, and some strange thing happened. I heard an eagle scream, although in my native city they have never been spotted. I opened my eyes and saw a short-haired, tanned lady in a silk dress sitting near me on my chair. Her eyes were deep green, like an olive, and I also clearly remember some scars on her face. I don't know why the hell, but I did not feel any scare near her. She took my right hand and started winding this red silk cloth on my hand, saying something with a Greek accent. It is no good for your mind to suffer, not because of big thoughts, is it? So keep your mind safe. The sharpest sword you ever had and the toughest shield can never be broken. I will watch over you, my dear. I do not remember exactly the whole of her speech, but the words above are 100% there. And yeah, it was Athena, without her famous helmet, spear, and clothes, but it was she, and I like. Well, it has to be Athena, or I just believe so. After that, I just woke up. It looks like my brain has restarted. The ache's also gone, and it only took half an hour after taking medicine. Yes, I could just say it was a strange dream, but after that, I noticed one thing. When my head hurts and I breathe out and clench my right hand, the pain goes away, not just for a few minutes or so, but completely. And that's some strange paranormal shit. Or she really is looking over me.